About 4 years ago, I figured out how to make outreach addictive. And I don't mean that in a negative sense where you would imagine me with a heroin needle in my arm sat at a slot machine. I managed to basically figure out how to make one of the most painful and unpleasant things, i.e. cold outreach. Like, I actually managed to make it addictive to the point where it was almost like I had just like you have an addiction to anything. Like I kind of, if I didn't do it, I'd get these weird withdrawal symptoms. It's a very powerful thing to do. I did eventually manage to wean myself off of outreach when I didn't have to do it anymore as I built a team. But in this video, I'm going to show you how to actually addict yourself to outreach, because I've always wondered, like, how do you become consistent, right? It's always been one of the things that I've been thinking about, and like consistency is everything, right, in business. I was like, who are the most consistent people on the planet? Well, addicts, right? You know, you don't have to convince an alcoholic to drink alcohol. You don't have to convince a gambler to gamble, right? It's just consistent, predictable behavior, which is a manifest of this strong, neurological addiction to the stimulus, right? So it's a difficult thing to do, but I studied addiction and I studied dopamine and some other neurochemical transmitters to really understand the nature of addiction and exactly how to do it. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through how I personally addicted myself to outreach. And this might not work for you because this is my experience, but it worked really well for me and I hope you can derive some value from it. So my name's Charlie Morgan. I have built and scaled 2 companies in my time. Welcome to the channel if you are new. The first company I built was Northflow Consulting. It was a marketing agency that we scaled to 7 figures and sold. The company I run at the moment, company number 2, is Imperium Agency, which is a coaching business that helps marketing agency owners, coaches and consultants and other people like that acquire more clients with predictability. Don't worry, I've got no 997 course or webinar to send you to. You're all good. So let's talk about addiction, right? The key to understanding addiction is to understand the brain, because the body is the thing that takes the action to fulfill the addiction, but the thing that really drives the addiction is the brain. And when we think about the brain, we have to break the brain down into different things, right? But the main thing we're going to focus on in this video is dopamine, right? Dopamine, our beloved friend that, spikes whenever we do something pleasurable. You should know what dopamine is by now. If you don't, then I would go back to learning that for sure. So it's all about layering dopamine, right? So how does addiction work? Let me explain this. In order for someone to become addicted to something, the stimulus that produces the reward has to be unpredictable. And what I mean by this is your body and brain shouldn't be able to predict when the reward you want is going to happen. Now, this doesn't apply to everything. I'm talking more about gambling here. If you look at slot machines, for example, or if you look at social media feeds, right? TikTok actually has created their algorithm so that you only receive content you really want to see irregularly. Because you think they'd create an algorithm where you always see content you want because you constantly scroll. But what happens with that is you get dopamine fatigue, right? So TikTok and, slot machines, they want to spike your dopamine and then lower it down and level it and then spike it again. Because if it was just spiked all the time, then eventually you would hit this threshold and this sort of standard and you'd become immune and dumb or blind to the dopamine. It would have no effect on you anymore. You'd be numb to it, essentially. So that's how TikTok's algorithm works is, spike, and then you see content you might not want to see and you're scrolling through, and then you see something you really want to see and then it spikes you up, and then you're scrolling and it's kind of boring, and then something really lights you up. It's the same way slot machines work, where you cannot predict. You pull that, machine, that lever, and it may be there, it may not be there. So how does this apply to outreach, right? Well, it's all about layering. So I'm going to give you an example here, and there's all sorts of ways you can do this, but I'm going to give you the framework and you can apply it in your own unique way. When you do outreach, it's really helpful to do something. I'm going to take the example of music, right? Listening to music, listening to your favorite song. If you're making cold emails, or if you're doing cold messaging or something like that, or whatever you're doing, you can listen to music, specifically music that really gives you a lot of dopamine and makes you feel really excited. Before doing outreach every morning, I would roll a dice. If that dice was a 3 or above, then I would not listen to music during outreach. But if on the dice, after rolling it, it was 1 or 2, then I would listen to music during outreach. So this sounds so strange, but it works so well, because in the morning before doing outreach, I was doing outreach regardless, right? No matter what. But if I rolled a 1, I got to listen to music whilst doing it. And if I did that, my dopamine would spike. And over time, when I rolled a 1 or a 2, because I never knew, I was like, okay, I'm doing outreach this morning, do I get to listen to music? It was no longer about, oh God, I've got to do outreach. It was more about, do I get to listen to music or not when I do outreach? Another example is if, let's say there's something really pleasurable that you enjoy, like playing Call of Duty or eating cake, right? After you finish the activity, or during the activity, maybe not Call of Duty, but like sweets or cake or something, like roll a dice or flip a coin, right? And if it lands on a certain like head or tail, or if it lands on a certain number, then you engage in the activity that produces the dopamine. The mistake a lot of people make is rewarding themselves, right? So you don't want to do outreach and then reward yourself with cake or reward yourself with a game of Call of Duty, because what happens is People think that operant and classical conditioning work on the premise where you associate the feeling of the reward with the activity that came prior to it. That works really well in dogs, but as you've probably noticed, you don't have a tail and you probably can't bark, right? At least if you try, you probably look a little bit weird. So we don't want to apply classical conditioning here, whereby stimulus plus reward equals association. Because if you research this, I learned this in Andrew Huberman's podcast, by the way, on dopamine. You can go and listen to it. But if you research dopamine, you'll understand that it's layering it in your activities that creates the activity to be addictive, if that makes sense. So it might sound a little bit too good to be true. It might sound a little bit weird, but genuinely before I did outreach every morning, I'd roll a dice. And if the dice landed on a certain number, then I would listen to like really intense music that I loved quite loudly during the cold emailing. And over time, like in the morning, when I was going to do the outreach, my brain would be like, it doesn't know what it does. It's unpredictable. It's irregular. It doesn't know if it's going to receive the spike in dopamine or not. And the spike was being like spiked by music. It wasn't being spiked by the actual outreach itself. But what I was doing is I was layering in this addiction. So every time I did outreach, I'd roll this dice and be like, oh yes, I can listen to music. So it sounds weird. It sounds like almost too abstract and too intangible to possibly be true. However, if you try it, like you'll just notice the anticipation, the anticipatory reward of dopamine and, you know, receiving that chemical whilst you're partaking in an action that you seem as painful. And your attention will shift away from the pain of the outreach and more towards the anticipation of the reward. The long-term way to actually make outreach really addictive is just to do it for long enough to get good at it to actually see rewards. I don't do it anymore, but like I have no issue doing cold messaging, cold calling, or cold emailing because I know that if I do it, I'm going to make a shitload of money, right? It's kind of like making YouTube videos. Like I'm very addicted to making YouTube videos because I really enjoy them, but every time we get a meeting through YouTube or an appointment through YouTube, it's a reinforced loop, if that makes sense, of dopamine. But in the early stages, if you need something a bit more to make your day consistent, then it works a lot better. Don't cheat on this. If you tell yourself you're only going to listen to music when the dice lands on like 1, 2, or 3, or 1 or 2, whatever, but play around with it. There's all sorts of stimuluses you can use, stimuli rather, but it's an awesome little tool. And like if you just stay consistent with outreach, you'll make money, right? But for some reason, people really struggle with consistency. I understand those reasons very well. Another video for another day. But yeah, that's everything. Now listen, if you like this video, I want you to like it, because when you like a video, what happens is it shows the video to other people like you, right? So if you found this video genuinely helpful, you could help someone else just by pressing a single button. Pretty cool, right? If you comment anything below, any video ideas or questions you've got, I really reply to pretty much every comment. I don't know how much longer I'll do that for, but for now I do. Any video ideas, comments, pop them below. And please do subscribe because, well, I like seeing that number increase. It makes my dopamine increase, right? But all jokes aside, I hope you're great. I hope you had a good day. And if you are an agency owner or a coach or consultant, if you click the first link in the description, there will be a video of me explaining how we can help you solve the problem of client acquisition. There's no obligation to click it. I don't really mind if you do or not, but if you want to solve the problem of acquisition, just click the first link. We are at the moment, like basically our calendars are pretty full. So when you click that, you might find there's not much availability, but check it out if you want to. But anyway, that's everything from me. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next one. Take care.